Hi guys. So, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. It truly, truly is. Before we start, let me give my usual disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research. Next, a huge thank you to my subscriber. I hope I say this right, and I'm so sorry if I butcher this. I truly am. Kyrix Sora 101 for telling me about this case and for sending me a bunch of information on it. I know that this story holds such a special place in your heart, so thank you for picking me to be the one to do the story, and I truly hope that I've given this story the justice that it deserves. I really do. I know how special this is to you, and it means so much to me that I was the one that you picked to cover this story. Okay, and with that, let's get started. Samantha Link was born on August 15th, 1995 in Dubuque, Iowa, to parents Neil Link and Jacqueline Nelson. She had one sibling, a sister named Cassandra. She was a graduate of Dubuque High School, where she earned the reputation of being an amazing soccer player. She was described as a kind and gentle person who possessed a natural love and respect for those with special needs. And she assisted families within nursing homes. At the time of her death, Samantha was dating a guy named Fonte Bulow for about 6 months. March 30th, 2017. Samantha and Fonte rent a room at the Best Western Hotel so that they can use the hot tub. On the way to rent the hotel room, the couple stop and they purchase a bottle of vodka and the white powder that goes up your nose. While at the hotel, the couple hangs out in the hot tub. They do the white powder and they finish off half of the bottle of vodka. Then at around 10 p.m., the two decide to meet up with friends at a bar named Easy Street. Fonte would testify in court that the couple began arguing over his past relationships. Surveillance video from that night would show that there were times when the couple were happy and kissing, and then there were points in the evening where they were clearly not on speaking terms and not getting along with each other. These highs and lows seemed to go back and forth a few times throughout the night, with the high coming to an end about 30 to 45 minutes before the bar closed. Fonte would send Samantha several text messages that night, with the final two being sent at 1:18 a.m. and at 1:30 a.m. on March 31st, 2017, because now it's the following day. With one of them saying, "I'm by myself looking stupid, so I got 2 minutes and I'm leaving. Nobody knows where you are as always." And now this girl in my face talking how she win because you were in the bathroom with her. You made me look like a fool. Okay, what is he referring to? Earlier in the evening, Madeline Naderman spoke with Samantha in the bathroom of the bar. She claims that while the two were in the bathroom, Samantha became upset, yelled at her, and began to charge at her. Luckily, though, Madeline was able to calm Samantha down. They ran into each other one more time in the bathroom when the two would discuss Fonte. Madeline would describe Samantha as being a sloppy drunk at the time, But nevertheless, the girls hugged it out and left the bathroom together peacefully.
Nominated to do the polar plunge by Mackenzie Rankin. I'm gonna nominate Ashley Simon, Damian Ernzen, Logan Klosterman, who else? Emily Gedkin, and Jennifer Wessels. You guys have 24 hours. Logan, you have until Sunday. I found the bottom! It's so fucking good! Oh my god! Oh my god, it's so cool!
A friend of Samantha's named Hannah Randall was with her that night. She saw her sitting in her car in the parking lot of Easy Street. When she went over to Samantha to talk to her, she told her that her and Fonte were fighting and that he had thrown her phone. So Hannah, being the friend that she is, walked inside the bar and asked Fonte to give her back Samantha's phone. She says that Fonte started screaming at her, saying, "She sent you over here to ask me? F her. I don't know you." I don't know if that means he doesn't know her well or if he doesn't know her at all, because Hannah was one of the friends that was hanging out with them that night. Hannah says that she offered Samantha a ride home, but Samantha declined her offer. Taylor Swim and Hillary Atkinson were also friends of Samantha and were also with her that night at Easy Street. After the bar closed, the three girls were sitting in Samantha's car. Taylor would testify that Samantha wanted to leave with her girlfriends that night, but Fonte refused to let that happen. While the girls were talking in the car in the parking lot of Easy Street, Fonte would approach the car and start screaming at Samantha, something along the lines of, "You made me look stupid," to which Samantha replies, "You made yourself look stupid." After all this, the fighting in the bar, the text messages, the fighting outside the bar, the argument in the bathroom, Samantha would end up leaving with Fonte. And it would probably be the biggest mistake of her life. So they would end up going home to the basement apartment that they rented together from Fonte's friend. Okay. So this is where there are two very conflicting stories. One from Fonte's side and one from the side of the state, the coroner, the medical examiner, and detectives. Once home, Fonte would say that the argument continued. And he said that he told Samantha to not only get out of the basement, but to get out of the home. Fonte states that instead of Samantha leaving, she strikes him, which would then spark a physical altercation. He says that he then forced her up the stairs and into the kitchen. Then once they were in the kitchen, the fight escalated and became so intense that Samantha's boots were kicked off of her feet, her hair was pulled out of her ponytail, and there was a dent left in the dishwasher. The state says that Fonte, who was left-handed, reached for a knife in the nearby butcher block, causing the block to fall over and spill the knives out. He then stabbed Samantha 3 times, twice with such force that he plunged the knife 5.5 inches into her heart and into her lung, okay? With both wounds, either one, being immediately fatal. And the third wound, although being a wound, not being fatal. Fonte, who was described as frantic and erratic, would call 911, but only after he called his friend and, roommate, owner of the home first, and the friend didn't answer, which seems like insignificant information, but it's actually not. You will actually come back around to that later. So he calls 911 and he tells the operator that Samantha had done this to herself. When the officers arrived, they found Fonte standing in the doorway of the home. He was immediately detained and placed in the back of the police cruiser, okay? When officers tell him to relax, he responds by yelling at them, quote, "You stab your effing spouse in the face and you relax." Okay, version 2, Fonte's version, is that Samantha started to walk up the steps. She walked into the kitchen. She grabbed a knife. She turned it towards him. Then he says that Samantha was going to attack him. So he retreated and held the basement door just in case he needed to protect himself. He says that Samantha then... I'm sorry. This is just so infuriating. See, this whole thing just infuriates me. He says that Samantha then turned the knife on herself and herself once in the stomach, and that he denied ever touching the knife. Okay? This was the first night let me just put out that this was the first night that he spoke to officers. That night, he spoke to Detective Wall and other officers in length, okay? He told them that Samantha had stabbed herself once in the stomach and likened it to a Japanese sacrifice. Okay, what's a Japanese sacrifice for those of you that don't know? Because I actually didn't know. I had to look it up. Japanese sacrifice is a form of somebody unaliving themselves that is considered honorable among the Japanese samurai class. He went on to tell Officer Link that Samantha had never made statements about wanting to unalive herself or expressing to want to harm herself. So he was very surprised when she did this to herself. While speaking with Officer Wall, Fonte noticed that there was blood on his right hand, to which he responds, "I'm left-handed. That makes me look good." He goes on to say, "I thought that Bitch was dead," and refers to her death as a blessing in disguise. Blood spatter belonging to Samantha was on Fonte's face, shirt, and it was visible throughout the entire interview with police. He also had scratches on his face, cheek, armpit, chest, and an abrasion near his jawline. But he never touched her, okay? He never touched her. This is what he says. Detectives would go on to say that during the interview, Fonte was often lighthearted, relaxed, and laughing. He tested positive for alcohol, benzos, the white stuff that goes up your nose, and marijuana. Along with this, Fonte's story would change. His initial story was that he had never touched Samantha in any way. But during the first interview, he left out the part about the altercation in the basement. When officers asked him if she would have any marks on her body, he told police that she may have some grab marks on her from when he pushed her up the basement steps, where the argument began, but denied that she would have any bruises on her face. Okay, first of all, this is why the argument in the basement even came up to begin with, because he was trying to minimize the fact that this girl had bruises all over her. He told officers that Samantha fell on the steps in his initial interview, but at his trial, he testified that Samantha fell on the steps several times, presumably trying to explain away the many bruises on Samantha's face. Next at trial, Fonte claimed that the door to the basement was open when Samantha attempted to unalive herself. But he originally told police that he was guarding himself with the door, at the very least partially shut. But the evidence shows that there was no blood on the basement door, either on the inside of the door or the outside of the door, on the door frame, or on the tiles that are in front of the door. This is critical evidence because it makes it nearly impossible that Samantha's blood would have ended up on Fonte if he had been standing in the doorway, and especially if the door is partially shut. On top of all of this, he failed to tell the officers that he called his friend and roommate before calling 911 to help his girlfriend, who just attempted to unalive herself. Just stop and think about this for 1 second, okay? This person that you love, okay? First of all, I would like to think that I would never stand there and watch that happen. But let's play devil's advocate and say that I was frozen in fear, okay? Or that I didn't believe it would actually happen, okay? Let's just play devil's advocate real quick, right? Fine. It happens. The first person that I would call would be 911. I wouldn't call my friend and my roommate first, and then once my friend and my roommate fail to answer, then decide to call 911. It makes no sense in my opinion. If your opinion is different, let me know. If you've experienced this, I'm so incredibly sorry. And if you feel so inclined to share your story in the comments below, please do so. The state's medical examiner, Dr. Dennis Klein, ruled Samantha's death a homicide. Her autopsy revealed 3 stab wounds on her right little fingers. 2 of the 3 wounds were independently fatal. 2 of her wounds were so deep that they actually penetrated the chest wall. One of them so far into the chest that it went into the heart. And the second one went deep enough that it actually went right into the lung on the opposite side. The third wound did not penetrate the chest. It was actually on Samantha's right hand with a sharp force injury that Dr. Klein would describe as your classic defense type wound. In addition to the 3 stab wounds to her chest and the 2 cuts to her right hand, Samantha also sustained other injuries, including large bruises on her forehead and nose, and then 2 more discrete wounds on the inside of her mouth just below her lower lip. And on the left side of the inside of the oral area, inside her scalp, and on the back of her right hand. And on the left side of the inside oral area, inside her scalp, and on the back of her right hand, as well as scratch marks on her stomach, abrasions on her left chest, and small contusions on her lower extremities. We're not done. Her forehead had a large hemorrhage, which indicated a significant impact site. Dr. Klein stated that these injuries were not consistent with injuries sustained from falling, and that they were instead more indicative of injuries that occurred when people were being struck. Samantha's toxicology. Her toxicology report showed that she had a blood alcohol level of 0.22. She was at the hotel with her boyfriend, hanging out in the hot tub, drinking. Then she was at a bar, as well as alprazolam, fluoxetine, marijuana, and the white stuff that goes up your nose. Dr. Klein also examined Samantha's clothing and found that the defects in her shirts matched the STAB wounds in her chest. Dr. Klein said statistically, if you have defects through clothing, it tends to favor homicide, as opposed to Samantha trying to unalive herself. According to Dr. Klein, if she was trying to unalive herself, it would be more likely that she would remove her clothing or move her clothing out of the way and then inject herself. Dr. Klein determined that the stab wounds to the chest were primarily vertical to slightly oblique, with oblique as an angle between vertical and horizontal. Dr. Klein also determined the entrance wound was down and the blunt side of the blade was up. In order for these wounds to be self-inflicted, Samantha would have to have held the knife in a very awkward position. He would go on to say that when a wound is self-inflicted, it's typical that most of the wounds are horizontal because it's much less awkward and much more natural to go in horizontal rather than vertical. Other factors that led to Dr. Klein's decision that this was a homicide rather than an unaliving were that the knife was found 8 to 12 feet from Samantha's body. There were multiple stab wounds, The stab wounds went through Samantha's clothing. And the fact that unaliving from a stab wound is very, very rare in women. Not that it doesn't happen, just that it's rare, The orientation of the wounds were vertical rather than horizontal. The wounds went through the cartilage, When wounds are self-inflicted, they take the path of least resistance, which means they would go through tissue rather than cartilage. because it's much easier to get through tissue than it is to get through cartilage. The cuts to Samantha's right hand are indicative of self-defense wounds. And finally, the major blunt force injuries to her head. Okay, guys, I know that was a lot. Please stay with me, please, because now we're going to go to the other side of the spectrum, which would be Fante's defense. Okay? Michael Halverson performed a blood stain pattern analysis, okay, on the blood stains in the kitchen and on Fante's clothing. He determined that the blood stains that were found on the kitchen floor near Samantha's right hand were not caused by the knife. He says that instead, it's more likely that Samantha's right hand caused the stain when officers moved her body to render aid. Never mind the wounds on the hand. Michael Halverson analyzed the shirt that Fante was wearing. He allegedly STABBED Samantha. He says that because of the limited quantity of stains on the shirt, he was unable to determine that whether the stains were cast-off stains, which is a blood stain pattern that results from drops being released from an object due to its motion. However, he did determine that the stains were spatter stains and not transfer stains. Spatter stains are blood stains that move through the air, while a transfer stain is a blood stain resulting from a blood-buried surface being moved to another surface, which would go along with the blood came from when officers moved Samantha's body in an attempt to render aid. Bullshit. In my opinion. Bullshit. Concluding that Fante's shirt was in close proximity to Samantha's blood while it was in liquid state. Further concluding that Samantha was in an upright position when she was STABBED. Fante hired another person to testify on his behalf, Dr. Bradley Randall, who is a forensic psychologist, testified that he mostly agreed with Dr. Klein's autopsy results, but that he disagreed with a few parts of them. While Dr. Klein called the cuts to her right hand typical defensive wounds, Dr. Randall believes the cuts are a result of Samantha's hand slipping off the knife while she was trying to unalive herself. He also testified that he believes that this is the manner of death because the circumstances are more suggestive of it being self-inflicted rather than Fante being the one that caused the wounds. Unlike Dr. Klein, though, however, Dr. Randall's failed to go into the specifics of what led him to these conclusions. How much were you paying Dr. Randall to testify this, in my opinion, BS on your behalf? I'm just curious. I realize that some of you may believe that she did this to herself, that Fonte is innocent, and that Dr. Randall is correct. And that's okay. I think that we are all entitled to our opinions. I, however, do not believe that for a nanosecond. I just don't. I don't believe for a nanosecond that she did this to herself. That's just my opinion. I want to hear your opinions in the comments, though. I do. I truly do. And if you really, truly think that she did this to herself, I want you to tell me why. Maybe you picked up on something that I didn't. But currently, I don't believe it. Okay. Dr. David Bean. Dr. David Bean is a psychologist who also testifies on Fonte's behalf. He states that he reviewed Samantha's medical records for the last 12 months of her life. He testifies that the fluoxetine, which is an antidepressant that was in her system, along with the alprazolam that was in her system, that is an anti-anxiety, are cardinal signs of individuals with depression. Fair enough. And that mixing these medications with alcohol could intensify thoughts of unaliving yourself. Fair enough. But he did not express an opinion as to whether or not this was the cause of Samantha's passing. In January of 2018, Fonte Bulow was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Shortly after this, he was granted a second trial, with his defense arguing that the district court should have permitted him to introduce into evidence Samantha's prior attempts to unalive herself. The state believed that Samantha's statements in her medical records regarding her past attempts were made for the purposes of a medical diagnosis and a treatment. So here's the thing. Samantha did not have a long history of attempts to unalive herself. For a short period of time in 2014, she tried it twice. Her medical notes confirmed that shortly after this, she was diagnosed and treated for bipolar disorder. And although Samantha did continue to suffer from anxiety and depression after her diagnosis, she never attempted to unalive herself again. Okay? But the defense argued that because Samantha had a diagnosed medical condition that has certain specific symptoms the night of her death, Samantha acted on these symptoms. Again, I disagree. Shortly after this, Fonte was granted a second trial, arguing that the district court should have permitted him to introduce into evidence Samantha's prior attempts to unalive herself.
We found Fonte Bulow guilty of second-degree having Samantha Link. KCRG TV9's Allison Wong was in the courtroom today at the sentencing. So, Allison, what did Bulow say in that courtroom?
Well, he told Link's family that he did not know their daughter, sister, granddaughter, but it was clear from their victim impact statements that they did not believe him.
Sammy was one of the most wonderful, beautiful, and kind, loving persons that I have ever known.
A crowded courtroom filled with people supporting two families. People there for Samantha Link remembered the person they lost.
Sammy had such a big heart. She loved what she chose to do as a career and wanted to go on to school to pursue a career in healthcare.
And they had words for Fonte Bulow.
See this little boy? See him smiling? He doesn't smile anymore. Not one bit. This boy cries every single day for his sister.
Our daughter and try to put the blame on her. Sammy is the innocent victim that you murdered in cold blood.
But Bilo insists he's innocent, telling the courtroom it was tough to be in jail when he was first charged.
I remember waking up in the middle of the night, half asleep, forgetting where I was, and reaching my arm out for Sam, only to feel the cold wall in my cell. With all of that, I had to juggle that I somehow am being blamed for all of this. I don't care what these people tell you. They were not there, and I swear to God I did not do that.
He says he's not done fighting for his innocence.
But I need to prove I didn't do this. And I would like for all of you to at least try and be at peace when I do.
You're to suffer in pain, regret, and disgust for the rest of your life. I know forgiveness brings peace, but I cannot find the strength in myself to forgive you.
The choice that you made to take her life altered all of our futures, our future forever, as we are stuck with memories of what could have been.
Everyone desperately just wants peace, deserves closure. It hurts so bad to know that none of us have peace. Absolutely nothing is more of an issue to me than that.
Okay, so let's go over the facts one more time, and then I will tell you what happened at the second trial and what my opinion is if you don't already know. I'm sorry, I'm actually super passionate about this trial because it infuriates me. I'm so infuriated by this story. Fontainebleau was given the opportunity to fully respond to the evidence provided by the state, and the district court allowed him to use the unaliving defense, which included a forensic pathologist that testified that he believed that the evidence pointed towards Samantha being the cause of her own passing. A psychiatrist testified that Samantha was taking her medications that they found in her system after her passing. He also explained that these medications can have an effect when mixed with alcohol, and we know that Samantha was drinking alcohol that evening. Okay. Samantha's behavior on the night of her death, by Fonte's testimony, was that she was angry and that she stabbed'd herself after he ended the relationship with her. The evidence presented proved that this death can be only one of two things, a homicide or a suicide, but it can't be both. It is strongly favored that this case is a homicide as opposed to a suicide. There's cell phone video. Cell phone video recorded 10 minutes before Samantha's death. And on the cell phone video, it shows that Samantha had no bruises to her face. But at her autopsy, bruises and cuts were found all over her head, mouth, face, skull, hands, and legs. These wounds show that in the 10 minutes before her passing, she was severely by Fonte. Allegedly. She also had 2 fatal wounds to her chest that were oriented in such a way that it made it nearly impossible for them to be self-inflicted. The knife that was used was found 10 feet away from her body, and Fonte denies ever touching or moving that knife. There was no blood on the carpet surrounding the knife, and very little blood found between Samantha's body and the knife. okay? Considering that Samantha obtained 2 fatal wounds, okay? For her to have done this to herself, this would mean, okay, that this is what kills me. This is what gets me. For her to have done this to herself, this would mean that she would have had to stagger into the living room, drop the knife, then stagger back into the kitchen to pass out on the kitchen floor, all while managing to drop a very minute amount of blood from her multiple fatal wounds onto the carpet. The other scenario would be that she did this to herself and then she tossed the knife, but a toss like this would result in cast off blood from the knife to the surrounding tile, carpet, and walls. And this was not present at the scene, making this scenario virtually impossible. Okay? Before dialing 911, Fonte phoned his roommate. Then when his roommate didn't answer, that's when he decided to phone 911. He also told the police that Samantha hit herself in the stomach, which is false. There were no wounds to Samantha's stomach. He originally leaves out the details of the altercation that began in the basement, and he made those disgusting remarks to police about her passing, such as it was a blessing in disguise.
Giving up hope.
I'm just ready for this to be over and Sam get her justice.
For the first time, we are hearing from family members on both sides of a trial that has divided some people in Dubuque. In January, a jury found Fonte Bulow guilty of second-degree murder. The juries agreed that he fatally stabbed his girlfriend, Samantha Link, while the two were fighting at his home last year. But Bulow insists Link herself.
Both families want justice. They just have different views of what that is. Now, the Bulow family wants a new trial, arguing the first was unfair. The Link family tells me they just want this painful chapter of their lives to be over. As the Bulow family gathers at home, one member, Fonte, is missing but not forgotten.
His absence sure has been felt, so.
His Aunt Tracy Less and other family members insist Fonte did not Samantha Link. They think problems with the jury led to the guilty verdict. One juror was kicked out for not deliberating, but the defense argues that juror was deliberating, and 2 others were bullying and harassing him to agree to a guilty verdict.
I believe it was the other gentleman who refused to look at any of the information or, do anything but try to coerce the rest of them to get on their side with the guilty verdict.
And they think other jurors might have felt the same pressure.
For us, I guess we wondered who else was being bullied in this situation.
The prosecutors warned us that they would attack every little thing that they could to get a retrial.
Sam Link's sister, Cassie Nelson, doesn't think there's any truth to that story. To her and the rest of her family, there's no way Sam herself, as the defense claims.
All the evidence is clear, and the unanswered questions.
What questions are unanswered?
Why the knife was 8 to 10 feet away from her, why she was, how she got multiple wounds.
Still, the Bulows insist Fonte is innocent.
How he was crying and how he was acting was not how somebody can make something up like that.
2 families with 2 different pictures of what justice looks like.
We just keep fighting for him, for justice.
I want this to be over with, and I want Sam to have her justice.
Okay, second verdict. In the end, on June 8th, 2021, the jury came back with the verdict, guilty on all counts, and the courts upheld the sentence. Fonte still maintains his innocence, and he's appealing his conviction again for the third time. Okay. Here's my opinion, guys. Disagree with me. If you disagree with me, disagree with me. Let me know why. I want to know why you disagree with me. Just please keep it respectful, okay? Because that's not who we are. And these are real people that are really suffering. So you can have a different opinion. I want to know what your different opinion is and why you came to that conclusion. Just please keep it respectful. My opinion personally, I do not believe for 1 second that Samantha did this to herself. I do not believe for a nanosecond that Samantha did this to herself. I think the evidence of this being a far outweighs the evidence of Samantha doing this to herself. Because I feel this way, I also think that is incredibly unfair to continue to victimize Samantha by putting out into the universe that she did this to herself. It gives me Chris Watts vibes when he initially blamed Shanann for the crimes against Cece and Bella, fully knowing that she did not do it, but not caring and just trashing her name. Those are the vibes that I get. This girl did not do this to herself, and it's not fair. Sorry. In my opinion, this girl did not do this to herself. And to trash her name like this is not fair to her. Next. To force her family to sit through this trial over and over and over again is victimizing them over and over and over again as well. Allow this family to properly mourn. It does not seem to me that this man is ever going to take responsibility for what he has done. So, therefore, in my opinion, if he is granted a third trial, I would solely blame the broken justice system for it. It is game over at this point. You did this to her. We may never truly know why you did this to her, but you did this to her. In my opinion, isn't it supposed to be innocent until proven guilty? You were found guilty twice. You were given your second trial, and again, you were found guilty. So we're going to now try to get a third trial and victimize Samantha's poor family again. And once again, not allow this girl to rest in peace. It needs to stop. That's just my opinion. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Why? I want to know. I truly do, because I am not perfect, okay? And truth be told, if you point out a mistake that I make, as long as it's done respectfully, I probably 90% of the time, probably 90% of the time, I acknowledge it. I thank you. I apologize, and I try to do better. So I want to know, did I miss something? Like, so point being, if I missed something, or I got something wrong, tell me. I truly, truly want to know. Other than that, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please do so. It would mean so, so, so very much to me. It truly, truly would. I put so much into these. So when you guys, like and subscribe and leave me love, you cannot imagine how much that means to me. If you have a case suggestion, email me, harding527@yahoo.com. And like I always say, as long as the available information is on my side, I will absolutely cover your case for you. This is our channel. This is not my channel. This is our channel. And until next time, my loves, take care of yourself and be safe out there.